Concerns over the timelines given to the political parties to conduct their primary elections have continued to grow as the deadline approaches. The pressure on the political parties increased after a request for an extension was denied by the Independent National Electoral Commission. Inec says any attempt to review the timeline will alter the rest of the schedule of activities ahead of the 2023 polls. But the chieftain of the ruling All Progressives Congress, Gbenga Olawepo-Hashim, says Inec's position could spell doom for the general elections. While he's alleging that the schedule has been influenced purely by a section of the political elite who have positioned themselves to benefit from the calendar. Well, his claims comes amid ongoing confusion on who legally qualifies as delegates for the primaries. Olawepo-Hashim warns that unless Inec gives way to reason, the political process might be jeopardized. Well, he says the window of extension of party primaries being canvassed will allow all parties involved get together to clean up the mess created in the Electoral Act. And to discuss these political issues, I'm now being joined in the studio by Chieftain of the All Progressives Congress, and he's also a presidential aspirant in the party, Gbenga Olawepo-Hashim, as well as a legal practitioner and public affairs analyst, Liborous Oshoma. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here and joining me in the studio tonight. Well, so much to look at, especially looking at the timetable. The time is running and the clock is ticking. I want to start with you, Olawepo-Hashim. Well, you have actually raised some concerns. Well, talk to us about what your fears really are with Inec actually insisting on sticking with the timetable as it stands.
Well, Inec has the right to conduct general elections, not party primaries. Party primaries are the internal affairs of parties. The Electoral Act that is operative now allows 180 days before election for parties to come with their nominations. Specifically, Section 29, subsection 1, provides that the parties will come up at least 180 days with their nominations to elections. So there is no reason in this world to insist that party primaries must be conducted by June 3rd. Now, I've been part of this process since 1999. As a matter of fact, the memo that led to the creation of Inec, because it was NECOM before, was written by my very good self, Pascal Bafiao, late now, and Emmanuel Wayao. The day Abacha died, we took this memo to Fort IBB. So we're quite familiar with some of these processes. This is the first time primaries will be conducted in 22 years now, around this time. It's usually between August and December, and for good reasons. So, but the present Electoral Act allows parties 180 days. So why the stampede? There shouldn't have been any stampede if you allow the party enough room to do their own business. Inec is not the general superintendent of the electoral system. I even see in the calendar stipulations and recommendations for when disputes that arise from primary should be disposed of by the judiciary. I mean, that's overreaching themselves in Inec. It's not their business. That's the business of the judiciary. So they are not just trying to regulate the party, they are also trying to intervene as to when the judiciary should dispose with pre-election petition.
Liborous, do you agree with him that the timetable is suffocated? Because INEC did give at least 3 months to the political parties. And some people, some analysts actually believe that, you know, INEC gave the notice, but they waited, parties waited till the last minute to conduct their primary. So you say you disagree. Tell us why.
I completely disagree. Let's even, my friends and brother here gave us a benefit of history. Let me also give you benefit of history. How we'll be doing it the same way for 22 years, we've never gotten it right. And at the end of the day, you find a governor who's sworn in, who still have pre-election matters in courts. So it is better and proper for us to dispose of primaries and pre-election matters even before going into election the main election and even swearing in. In 1979, it wasn't like this. We conducted primaries. FEDECO conducted primaries way before election. If you remember, we have been complaining consistently since 2003 that every year before the election, we always, there's always this, fire brigade approach. We had the Electoral Act Amendment 2002, just before the 2003 election. In 2007, we had Electoral Act Amendment 2006, before the 2007 election. In 2011, we had Electoral Act Amendment 2010, before the 2011 election. In 2015, even a few days to the election was when the Electoral Amendment was hurriedly signed into law. For us, I think we should that's why when the president refused to sign the Electoral Act Amendment, a lot of people complained that, look, there's need to sign this Electoral Act Amendment so that the political parties and Inec would take their time to conduct primaries, roll out regulations. Inec is not conducting primaries. They're observing. But because they are the ones to conduct the main election, the law also allows them to give guidelines for conduct of primaries. If the political parties organize themselves so well, INEC would not have to bother about guidelines. Like what is happening at Edo. As I speak, you have parallel congresses. It's on the ruling party syndrome. So there's need for proper guidelines and there's need for enough room. So you don't have a situation where INEC will have to keep waiting for court orders to know who to feed in as candidate. You remember what happened in Zamfara, even in Rivers. In Zamfara, the man had won election until the Supreme Court said, no, by virtue of the INEC guidelines, you ought not to be feeded at all. But meanwhile, a day before election, there was a court order for the Court of Appeal. Oh, look, no, you need to include this candidate in the ballot. So we need to sort out all of these things. INEC is not stampede any political party. If the INEC gave out guidelines long ago. If the political parties have put their house in order, each of them keep waiting for the other. Let's see what this one will do. Let's see what this one will do. Let them put their house in order. Conduct primaries. Primaries is not rocket science. Conduct primaries as at when due. Let all the candidates be known. And then you go into the general election. But this idea of waiting till the last minute, and then INEC will not have enough time, and then the litigations will drag for God knows how long.
So that was what the Electoral Act, as amended, actually intended to correct. It seems like you want to respond to what he says quickly, because we have other issues.
Yeah, I
we need to look
sympathize
at.
with the love of my friend for the political process more than the political operators themselves. But no matter how much you are concerned with these issues, they have to be done within law, not with whims and caprices.
Sorry, quickly.
So are you saying INEC is out of line?
Sorry,
Liborous, it's his time. Let him speak. Are you saying INEC is out of place with the timeline it gave to political parties? Tell us why. No, not you. Let him respond. You would have your time. You would have your time. So why do you say so?
The Electoral Act says 180 days.
At least.
180 days. The parties have up till 180 days before the election. 180 days is August, not June. And when you go to FEDECO era, no FEDECO will intervene in what MPN or anybody was doing. As a matter of fact, Shagari was not one of the people who presented himself for the party primaries. He was running for Senate. But the party in its supremacy, exercising its power, made him the candidate over the other ones that were contesting for president. That's the power of the party. And there are sections of the Constitution, all right, that expressly provides for the independence of political party. INEC is not a regulator of the democratic process. It only conducts elections. No matter how much you are enthusiastic.
Conducting an election still gives it the responsibility to ensure that the right things are done on time.
Okay, when the law says at least, it means not later than. It can be at least 300. It can be 300 days before, but not later than 100 days. When the law prescribed the number of days, it does not mean that INEC must wait until it is 180 days to the time. What INEC is doing, what INEC is doing is entirely within law.
Olawepo, now that INEC is insisting, I know that you had written, IPAC had also written. They have written, that's IPAC, you know, on behalf of the political parties had written, had called for, you know, a postponement or an elongation, if you want to put it that way. But INEC is insisting on its timeline. So what happens next?
Look, this is
what
the same INEC that postponed election day, that is saying parties who still have 2 months cannot adjust. I'm really ashamed at this hypocrisy. What is the business of INEC with party primaries? This same INEC postponed the presidential election on election day, and is saying people who have 2 months within the law cannot have their time. I don't understand why INEC is interested in that. So,
Liborous, as it stands right now, what advice would you be giving to INEC as it stands?
Should not shift ground. Are we even putting... it's not just about INEC here.
INEC should cause chaos.
It is not chaos. The political parties are the ones causing chaos. The law says at least 180 days. The law did not say that the primaries must be conducted on the nick of 180 days. At least, not later than. What it means is that you can conduct election, at least you can conduct election 300 days before, but it should not be later than 180 days. And then mind you, INEC is not doing this one because it hates the political parties. INEC also, we should also understand that INEC is the agency that is responsible in Nigeria today for the management of election. Absolutely. And whether internal democracy is also practiced in the political parties, it is responsibility of INEC to monitor. Why do you think the law allows INEC to monitor the process? So it is not their business to conduct primaries for you. It is for them to release guidelines and say, these are the rules of the game. And the rules of the game says, between this time, you must submit your list of candidates, because also they know the way politicians play here. Before you know it, at the nick of election, we're having court orders who should be candidate, who shouldn't be candidate. If there is enough time between when you are conducting the election and when primaries head, it will give room for court also that also have 180 days within which to dispose of some of these pre-election matters. Do you know that as I speak to you now, some other cases, ordinary civil matters and criminal matters in court are relegated to the back burner because of political election dispute. Yeah. And so INEC also is cognizant of those facts. And that's why they're saying, look, you know what? Let's give them, let's have enough time so that as we are doing us, the judiciary is also taking care of theirs. So at the end of the day, on the day of election, we don't have to consistently look behind our shoulders whether somebody is coming with a court order. Do you know, in the same vein, the court also, the Federal High Court also had introduced a practice direction that for all political matters, Liborous, they must be filed in Abuja.
I understand
so as to avoid a situation where you have multiplicity of suits.
Absolutely.
Because of the attitude of politicians.
The timeline now is a major concern for Hashim as well as the political parties. But for you, it's said. But at the end of the day, it's the prerogative. It's still in the hands of INEC to decide if there will be an extension or not. But gentlemen, another major issue. We have to actually move. It is in their hands. The law gives them the powers to conduct the election.
They're having this field day because the party the parties have refused to assert their independence.
How so? Their parties had 3 months, but most political parties decided to put their primaries just days before the expiration. So even if it's in August, some would argue that even if you push it to August, the parties will wait until the last minute. There is no political party since 1999, the major party, that has failed to put candidates forward at the prescribed time. Tell me one that has not presented the presidential candidate. It's still possible that the timeline is still okay. Liborous, let's move on. Let's move on. That's how the APC lost those 2 states with the issues there. But let's move on to another major issue. The fact that the president has still not signed the amendment as it was submitted to him since last week, Tuesday. Section 84, subsection 8 is still a major challenge. Statutory delegates. Now, we've seen the People's Democratic Party. They have started their primaries. Let's talk about the implication of that not being signed, and now parties have gone ahead with their primaries.
You know, a law is, you don't have to wait for a law that will suit you when there's an existing law. You know, when these laws are amendment at the level of a committee stage, from what I understand, even the office of the Attorney General is involved in the process of having to review clause by clause, you know, some of these amendments. One would have expected that even before the law is sent to the president for assent, that the office of the Attorney General would have a legal opinion on that document, instead of the president having, because of the time also, they are the ones complaining about the time now. And yet you have a law that is waiting for assent, and the president has sent to office of the Attorney General for opinion. And at the end, other parties have gone ahead with what is on ground, so that they also, mindful of the timeline given by Inec. So at the end of the day, they don't, you know, if you do not conduct these primaries within time, you say you'll be caught up by leeches and acquiescence. So if tomorrow the law is signed, then you apply the existing law. But as we speak now, there's a law in place. So why don't we use that?
You're smiling. Do you agree with him, or do you think this would actually create room for confusion after the president eventually signs?
In order to ask for due diligence. Laws that govern a country cannot be like toilet roll that you bring all the time. You know, these are laws that should govern us. But I also think that everybody is overreaching themselves. To start with, the National Assembly has got no business prescribing who will be delegates to the national conventions of parties in the first instance. It's entirely the internal affairs of party as prescribed in their constitution. And this is my worry. This country must be governed by laws, all right? Not by whims and caprices. We have come to a state whereby if I'm in the National Assembly, I try to take advantage of my situation. If I'm Inec boss, I try to take advantage of my own situation.
If you're a political party.
So this should not be. This should not be. A democracy, one of the fundamental precepts of a democracy is that there must be rule of law. All right? There are sections of the Constitution that says the parties are registered and they put their constitution with Inec. That is what governs them. So you don't need to make additional prescriptions for their own internal affairs.
Section 84, subsection 8 is unnecessary? Is that what you're saying?
That's not true.
Well, that's your opinion.
Let me quick question to you. I'll come to you, Liborous. Do you think it's unnecessary, that particular section?
I believe it's unnecessary. And the president said so. Because there are some sections of the Electoral Act that infringe on basic fundamental freedom. One of it is the freedom of association. Political parties are governed by that section that protects your freedom of association. Right. All right? And except where the Constitution expressly provides for the intervention of the National Assembly, you cannot go and intervene. Right. One of the problems we have had is that people are not challenging this thing.
Okay, so Liborous, let me, wait, I understand where he's coming from, but the truth is, as it stands right now, the rules are not clear with the president not signing. What does this actually say?
There are existing rules.
But for the statutory delegates, as it stands, which is why the president is still consulting, not just with his attorney general, but also with Inec. So what do you say that this really, says about our electoral process as a nation?
Let's first and foremost understand, I also need to add, just the same way everybody takes advantage of a situation, that's the same way the political parties have taken so much advantage of the lacunas in the system. That is why now you find the National Assembly wanting to make laws to regulate every activities of the political parties. If the political parties have conducted themselves in the way and manner political parties should conduct themselves, you wouldn't have to legislate on, for example, how much you should spend for election. But it is there. It is part of our laws. And we're talking about, in one breath we say there should be rule of law. In another breath we say no, there shouldn't be rule of law. You're blowing hot and cold from the same mouth. What should be? There should be rules. And those rules should be obeyed strictly. Any disobedience to the rule, there should be consequences. Here, what happens is political parties find every reason to circumvent the rules and then turn around to blame either the court, Inec, or the politicians. What led to all of these issues? You're practicing democracy. Democracy should not unnecessarily give advantage to one party against the other. There should be a level playing field. But a situation where a governor, for example, has 20,000 special advisors, 2,000 special advisors, and all of them are delegates at the convention. The moment that governor nominates any candidates, will you call that democracy, for example? So when you have such imbalances, and the political parties have refused to correct them, the parties, the members will find ways to enact laws to correct them. The politicians also should share in this blame. We shouldn't make it look as if we have sense as politicians in Nigeria. What we have is a system that is consistently destroying itself. And the moment you put structures to check them, they are quick to tell you, no, it shouldn't be, it shouldn't be.
But at the end of the day, the law is the law, and we have to stick by it. Olawepo-Hashim, let me come to you right now. Your party, the APC, it seems like the president is, pushing for the same thing he pushed during your national convention, for consensus. You an aspirant. Are you for the president? Are you with him for that option of consensus, or are you with Tinubu, who says, let everyone get a level playing field?
I'm no longer aspiring, by the way.
You have? So did you decide to support someone else in the race?
But I will say I'm a loyal party man. And at the end of the day, the party, in his own wisdom, will come to judgment as to what best suits it to give it advantage at the national election. As I said, the example I made in 1999, President Shagari was not an aspirant for the office of president. He wanted to be a senator. By the end of the day, the party felt, look, we need to do this to win election. And it was better advice. Those who were leading, like Maitama Sule and co, agreed. And that gave victory to the MPN. Now, what is called the supremacy of the party is that when the National Convention convenes, regardless of all the subsidiary activities, it has the power to take a decision on behalf of the party. That's the party tradition. I'm saying this because, you see, democracy is not just about legislations alone. It's about cultures, it's about practices. It has a soul, it has a spirit, it has a history. All right. And because I came to be a politician from a background of being a human rights activist, formerly, I fought against the military. I went to prison. So democracy for me is not just about election. It's about the rule of law.
Absolutely.
It's about upholding fairness, upholding equity. That's what it's all about.
Equity will be a good place for us to draw the curtains on this conversation. Liborous, unfortunately, we don't have the luxury of time. Liborous, Oshoma, unfortunately, I would have to say no more questions or answers. You are a legal practitioner and a public affairs analyst. Thank you for joining me tonight, as well as Gbenga, Olawepo-Hashim, a chieftain of the APC. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here.